Bridges are supposed to stand the test of time. But this one was a temporary structure that ended up overstaying its welcome by more than 60 years. Let's uncover the real story of the bridge that came dangerously close to taking New York down with it. A temporary bridge that lasted over 6 decades. In the early 1950s, New York needed a way to connect Rockland and Westchester counties across the Hudson River. The existing crossings were far too south, leaving a huge gap in transportation. But there was one big problem: money. The Korean War had just ended and steel was in short supply. Building a large, durable bridge would have been incredibly expensive, and New York simply didn't have the budget for a top-of-the-line structure. So they got creative, which is a polite way of saying they cut corners. Instead of investing in a bridge that could last 100 years, they built a cantilever bridge designed to last only about 50 years max. The idea was simple. We'll replace it later, but as we all know, later doesn't always come when it should. Instead, the bridge was patched, reinforced, and kept in service far beyond its intended lifespan, all while carrying far more traffic than it was originally designed to. Built on mud. I mean, literally. Building a bridge over a river is always a challenge. But building one over one of the widest points of the Hudson River while dealing with a weak foundation, well, that's a whole different level of difficulty. The Tappan Zee Bridge was built at a section of the river where the bedrock, the solid, stable rock that engineers usually rely on for support, was far too deep to reach. Normally, when a bridge is built, its supports are drilled deep into the bedrock to provide a firm, unshakable foundation. But that wasn't an option here, and unfortunately, the alternative wasn't great either. Instead of anchoring the bridge to solid rocks, engineers had to make do with soft, shifting mud. Beneath the deep, rushing waters of the Hudson, at this crossing lay a thick layer of silty, unstable soil, which was anything but ideal for holding up a massive 3-mile-long structure. With no bedrock within reach, the solution they came up was to use hollow steel piles, essentially giant tubes, pounded into the soft riverbed. The problem here was that these piles weren't actually anchored to anything solid. They were just pushed into the mud, meaning that instead of resting on a firm foundation, the bridge was essentially floating on a shifting, unpredictable surface. It was like trying to balance a stool on a wet sponge. It worked for a while, but it was never truly stable. And speaking of stability, make sure your content feed is built on something solid. Like this channel. Hit the like, subscribe, and keep your curiosity anchored right here. At first, the bridge seemed fine. Cars drove over it. Life went on. But as traffic increased and the structure aged, serious issues emerged. It swayed in strong winds, shifted under heavy loads, and moved in ways no bridge should ever. This instability caused a ripple effect. The constant movement stressed the steel framework, accelerating cracks and fractures. The shifting foundation led to uneven wear, making maintenance a never-ending struggle. Engineers fought to keep it standing, but the bridge was literally sinking into the mud beneath. Had it been anchored to a solid rock, it might have lasted longer. But here is the problem. There was no bedrock within reach. Instead, the bridge sat on hollow steel piles driven into unstable riverbed soil. This fundamental design flaw doomed it from the start. The truth became clear. This bridge wasn't just old, it was dangerously unstable. And the consequences of that instability would eventually force New York to take action. So instead of securing the bridge to solid rock, engineers made a risky decision. They used hollow steel piles, essentially giant metal tubes, and just pushed them into the soft, muddy riverbed. These piles weren't truly anchored to anything solid. Now, that meant the entire bridge sat on what was essentially a foundation of jello. At first, this didn't seem like a huge issue. But as traffic increased and the bridge aged, that instability became a major problem. The bridge was more prone to swaying and shifting, making it one of the most unstable major bridges in the country. A bridge that kept falling apart. If you own an old car, you know that feeling, right? Every time you fix one thing, something else breaks. That's exactly what happened with the Tappan Zee Bridge. For decades, engineers inspected the bridge, hoping to find it in decent shape. But every time they looked, the news just got worse. One of the biggest issues was rust and corrosion. The bridge's steel beams had spent more than 50 years being exposed to rain, snow, wind, and road salt. And if there's one thing that steel doesn't like, it's constant exposure to moisture and salt. Over time, rust ate away at critical parts of the structure, weakening it significantly. Then there were the cracks, and not just tiny ones. Any bridge carrying 140,000 vehicles a day is going to develop small fractures over time. But on the Tappan Zee, these cracks spread fast. Engineers tried patching them up, but it was like trying to fix a sinking ship with duct tape. The more they repaired, the worse things got. And let's not forget about the road deck, the actual part of the bridge that cars drove on. The original designers had made the concrete way too thin, probably as another cost-cutting measure. This means that the deck wore out much faster than expected. Holes started appearing, forcing maintenance crews to keep patching them up. But at a certain point, patches don't cut it anymore. The whole thing needed a replacement. Not ready for modern disasters. If rust, cracks, and sinking into the mud weren't bad enough, the Tappan Zee Bridge had one more huge problem. It wasn't designed to handle modern natural disasters. In the 1950s, people weren't too concerned about earthquakes or hurricanes in the New York area. But as building standards improved and climate change led to stronger storms, engineers realized that the Tappan Zee wasn't ready for a major disaster. One of the biggest concerns was earthquake. If a big quake hit, the Tappan Zee probably wouldn't survive. Modern bridges are designed to flex and absorb seismic shocks, but the Tappan Zee was rigid and outdated. Since it sat on unstable mud, a strong quake could have caused the entire structure to shift or collapse. Then there was the issue of wind resistance. Modern bridges are designed to bend and flex in strong winds. But the Tappan Zee? Well, not at all. If a powerful storm or hurricane swept through the region, it could have put extreme stress on the structure, leading to potential failures. The construction nightmares and legal battles. When construction on the new bridge began in 2013, everyone hoped for a smooth process, but that was not what happened. The project faced delays due to bad weather, design complications, and even a massive crane collapse in 2016. This accident halted traffic and raised concerns about the safety of the entire project. To make matters worse, lawsuits started piling up. In 2019, Tappan Zee constructors sued New York for $900 million, claiming they had to deal with unexpected costs. By 2021, the amount had jumped to $961 million, and the legal battles were still going strong in 2024. Meanwhile, the New York State Thruway Authority launched its own lawsuit over faulty cables that could affect the bridge's long-term durability. Then came the bold controversy. At some point during construction, someone noticed something very concerning. The steel bolts, those little super important fasteners that hold everything together, were breaking. That's not supposed to happen. These weren't just ordinary bolts you pick up at the hardware store. They were high-strength bolts designed to last for decades, but some of them were snapping way earlier than expected. At first, people assumed maybe a few bad bolts had slipped through, but then a whistleblower, someone working on the project who wasn't willing to stay quiet, came forward and said, "This is bigger than you think." They claimed that there were major issues with the bolts, and that some of them might have been defective right from the beginning. Worse, they alleged that the construction team may have tried to cover it up. This immediately launched an investigation with experts trying to figure out whether the bolts were failing because they were made poorly, because they had been over-tightened, or because of some other factors. But regardless of the cause, the fact that the bolts were snapping was a major concern. If enough of them failed, parts of the bridge could weaken over time, leading to expensive repairs, or worse, a serious safety hazard. The whistleblower's claims sparked more legal battles, piling onto an already troubled project. Experts insisted that the bridge was still safe, but the controversy only fueled public doubt and added to the growing list of issues. What was already a messy situation became even more chaotic, making the bridge's future even more uncertain. Today, drivers crossing the Hudson River might not think much about the bridge beneath them, because to them, the new Tappan Zee, now called the Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, is just another part of their commute. If you enjoyed the deep dive into the Tappan Zee Bridge, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating infrastructure stories. And if you're curious about another monumental project, check out our video about the $7 billion Oakland Bay Bridge.